Been getting a few questions about how to zero in some of these squirrel guns. Well, we're going to talk both about the 22 long rifle and the 17 hm2. And all this video is going to cover is a leaves on application, which would generally mean most of your shots would be inside of maybe 60 yards, okay? First, we're going to start with a 22 long rifle. Now, when you adjust your scope on that gun, remember, as soon as that bullet leaves the barrel, she goes to dropping. So you're actually adjusting that scope where the line of sight catches the arc of the bullet, okay? So that scope is only going to be right at one particular setting using the same ammunition, assuming constant velocity. Now, there's a little variation amongst rounds, okay? So your highest point, okay, I like to set a 22 long rifle with leaves on. I like to zero it for 35 yards. Now, when you do that, okay, when you zero it for 35 yards, does this mean you can kill a squirrel farther than that holding on him? Well, sure you can. And this is the big thing with leaves on. You must take into account the 22 long rifle is so slow that it feels the effects of gravity, okay? Which means when you start shooting up at 45 degrees or 60 degrees, okay? Now, one thing to keep in mind, generally the farther, let's say you're shooting at a squirrel like you're at 50 yards. Well, generally, if you're doing that, your angle is going to be cut down somewhat, okay? Versus a real close shot where you might be shooting 50 degrees elevation or 60 even, or even higher. Okay, so what that extra elevation will do is it will buy you some distance. In this situation here with a 35 yard zero, shoot with some elevation, you could probably expect to be hold dead on, probably out to about 45 yards. It's probably going to buy you about 10 yards, 8 to 10 yards, okay? 50 yards, you're going to be low, okay? You're going to be low at 50 yards. If you hold straight on that squirrel's head, you're going to come in low, even though you've got some elevation. It's helping you, but it won't help you enough. So we're going to talk about something else here that can help you with this particular situation. And this also applies to shots that are, let's say, inside of 25 yards. That's the shots you'll miss with a scoped rifle if you're not careful. And a lot of people, you know, 50 yard zero, you'll hear this talked about a lot. Well, 50 yard zero is no count when leaves are on. If you zero a 22 rifle at 50 yards and you shoot at a squirrel at 20 or 35 yards with steep angle, you're going to come in high on his head. You might kill him, but you're going to be mighty high on his head, okay? So I've got these two reticles drawn here. Now, here's one here. You'll see it's got this thicker outside, and then you got the little cross in the middle. This is what a lot of people probably use versus a standard, you know, just a cross. And what you'll run into is you'll have these variable power scopes like 3x9, okay? And people will start fooling with them in the woods, and it's okay to do that, I guess, but what you need to remember is when you start adjusting this scope magnification, your distances, reference points between these thicker posts in this scope change. So on real close shots, I always recommend people to use your cross as the reference. When leaves are on, use the cross as the reference. And what I mean by that, you got a squirrel's head right here. Now you got a squirrel comes in on you, he comes on you at 15 yards or 10 yards. Well, your gun is never going, your scope, your bullet is going to be down here, okay? Your line of sight is going to be up here and your bullet is still low, so I always put the cross right there on top of that head. Now, some people will try to use these like this thicker post here is reference marks. Well, that's all fine and dandy if you can get used to that and leave your scope magnification set. But some of these scopes like this don't have variable objectives where you can adjust adjustable objectives. So what you're forced to do on a real close shot sometimes is you'll turn the scope down to 3 power so it's focused so you can see what you're shooting at. Well, when you do that, and if you try to use these reference points here, you're going to shoot high. Okay. So on real close shots, you know, and the best thing to do is zero your 22 rifle. Now remember, when you start shooting up in trees, it's going to shoot a little higher. Okay. But when you do zero your rifle, say at 35 yards, put you a target up at 15 yards and aim right at the center and see where your bullet hits. Give you an idea. Put you a target up at 5 yards and shoot at it. And see where the bullet hits, and then look at your cross and try to draw a visual in your mind about, okay, here's how high I need to hold. Now try to use your circle. A 1-inch dot is probably a little too small. Try to use a little bigger one if you can to get you a good ready reference in your mind. Okay, where to hold when you see that squirrel. Because it's going to be the close shots that give you a lot of trouble. Usually it's because of the distance, and usually a squirrel sitting real close is more fidgety. The odds are he's not going to sit still as long, or he's not going to sit still very long at all, so you're having to shoot fast, instinctive. Okay? So that's my recommendation for the 22 long rifle. Now I don't generally use high velocity shells when I use one. I don't use one much anymore. I use a hm2 17 caliber. Okay, so now the 17 hm2. Now its trajectory is flatter, which means when you zero it for 50 yards, okay, the bullet is below the line of sight all the way till it gets close to 50 yards. Even at 45 yards, it's below your line of sight, okay? It's low. But again, with a little elevation, shooting a squirrel at 45 yards, you're probably going to be more or less right on the money. So where you need to watch with a hm2 is you need to watch your shots that start getting down into the 25 and less category, okay? That's where you're going to struggle. That's where you're going to shoot low. Now, granted, a hm2 shooting a jawbone on a squirrel has a higher tendency to kill versus 22 long rifle. And that's based on my first-hand experience, okay? So the hm2 do the same thing. Try to zero it at about 50. And then back your target up to 25 or 30 and shoot it. See what she does. Now, a lot of people are running big objectives on their scopes. I'm one of those people. And that factors into it, okay? My scope is about 1.6 or maybe more than that over the barrel center, okay? Which means back here close at 10 yards, boys, that old bullet, she's down there low, okay? But I have one advantage. I'm using a first focal plane scope, so that'll help me because my reference doesn't change no matter what power of the magnification wheel I'm on versus a second focal plane scope. So again, put your target and keep backing her up. Zero her at 50, shoot your target, shoot you a couple of rounds at 40, 30, 20, 10, all the way down to 5. Watch how much you have to hold over if you're running, say, a 44 or 50 millimeter objective on the scope. You're going to have to hold over quite a bit. Now, when you start getting down here this close, and this goes for both 22 long rifle and hm2, when you start getting down into the 0 to 20 yard category, elevation of the shot is not going to hurt you or help you very much, okay? It's when you get out past that. Now the hm2, since it's so fast, gravity has less time to affect it. So these elevated shots out to 60 yards, you're not going to see very much difference compared to the slower 22 long rifle. Remember, it's traveling twice as fast, okay? So it's going to have half the effects. Gravity can only serve on it half the time, okay? Now leaves off is a different ball game. And I generally, believe it or not, I run a seasonal 0 on my guns, on this hm2 even. Leaves off versus leaves on. I just thought I would share this. There's a lot of people out there, some beginners, okay? But just remember, when you're shooting on the ground, especially this 22 long rifle, what you'll get in the woods shooting up in the trees will be somewhat different. And you may be missing some shots out there, steeper angle shots at 40 yards, and you're trying to figure out why you're missing them. And if you zeroed this gun at 50 yards on a level, that's a good reason why. You're shooting over your squirrels, okay? I hope you enjoyed.